a lot of people forget this, but your documentary brings it back. I was a writer at Saturday Night Live for a couple of years. Then I'm doing the late night show, and our studio was on the 6th floor, and the Saturday Night Live studio is on the 8th floor. But right down the 6th floor, not far down the 6th floor, there was a little office because in the early days of SNL, the first season, Jim Henson, Frank Oz, they're doing, the Muppets are part of SNL, and they had a little office and they drew all of these characters on these pipes.
Right.
And now, of course, it's been put behind glass and preserved. But in my day, you could just go by and there's some pipes there and they're just covered with
those drawings. Yeah, amazing.
And I'm trying to wipe them off, you know, because I like clean pipes.
Oh, no!
I just think pipes should be clean.
No.
But I couldn't get them off. No,
but that was a misstep for them, right?
Yes.
Because that kind of didn't
well, you know
work
what's
out.
interesting is that all the cutting edge, cool, sardonic, you know, Michael O'Donoghue's, you know, wise asses at first season SNL were like, these puppets, what are they? These puppets are here. I hate these puppets. And so it was very, you can tell in the documentary, crushing to Jim Henson. And then he spirals off from that and creates the Muppet Show.
Yeah. But he'd been trying to sell the Muppet Show for years and failing. I mean, all the networks turned it down twice. There's a hilarious pitch sort of video that they made that is
using the Muppets to sell the idea.
Yeah, and going completely over the top, and it's Jim's voice, and it's just brilliant. You know, it's so interesting because Jim was, you know, you got to really know him. I met him only once, but it's so shy and retiring in person. You know, I mean, just kind of, and you think of him as a performer, but not with a microphone, not with a camera on his face. It's through the puppets, you know. And we were talking about Andy and Don, but it became so clear, not even so much from the interview with Frank Oz, because he was very modest about his contributions, but as I began to recognize and look at these videos, what a comedy team they were.
Yes,
not just Bert and Ernie, but you know, Miss Piggy. And Kermit, or there's a great bit in there with Fozzie and Kermit, and this is timing. I mean, it's like precision comedy timing, and they just nailed these bits.
Well, I think that's the thing is good comedy is good comedy. So if you're making it for kids on PBS, or you're making it, you know, for adults in a theater, good timing is good timing. That's why, I mean, I always got my timing from early on from Warner Brothers cartoons because they were shown as shorts in theaters to adults. They weren't condescending.
Right.
So the timing was pitch perfect on those.
Yeah.
And then I think the same thing with when you look at a really good Sesame Street bit, it's just good.
Yeah.
There's no condescension of, this is funny for kids.
But I didn't realize how many of those bits that Jim directed. I just thought he brought the Muppets and performed, and they did that. And I didn't realize that all those bits that used to catch my attention when 3-year-old Bryce was watching them were the counting bits and these great little experimental things that would make me sit down and watch the show and kind of admire what was going on there and envy it a little bit. And I later realized, well, that was one of the reasons Jim did it, because he never wanted to do kids programming, but they said, you know, bring the Muppets, but we'll also let you do your experimental films. But how about doing them for kids so that they can learn? And he had a son with severe learning disabilities, so that was something that he was, you know, clued into. And he was wouldn't you say that the reason it really worked at every level was that he was really a satirist, right?
Definitely.
I mean, it's always there.
What's interesting is that the early way that he made money was by making television commercials.
Right.
And so there are these Muppet commercials that, I don't know if you've seen them, but they're in black and white. And it's before anyone knew they were the Muppets, but you can tell it's the same, kind of almost the same characters, but they're prototypes. But they're doing like Hormel ham commercials.
Right.
But they're and they last like 7 seconds long. But because they're 7 seconds long, they're very meta.
Right.
They're very today's sense of comedy.
Yeah.
They're not buy a Hormel ham. They're very weird and very funny by today's standards, and must have looked like very strange at the time.
And yet really popular.
Yeah.
You know, so they really, really broke through. I mean, they were doing some kind of, there was almost always an explosion or a gunshot involved in a Hormel ham commercial somehow.
No, but bacon, they're pretty much selling anything But they're doing ads the way we, as part of the podcast, we do ads. And I always do them in my sensibility, my way. And then afterwards think, no one's going to pay for that.
Right.
And they do.
Yeah.
And you can leave this in. I don't think they should. But they do. And Adam Sachs is going to take that out. But because they see the value of, we found out that they like that people listen to the ads.
Yeah. And I mean, they were emotional without being sentimental. Definitely always had a point of view and always had something to say, in and around the zaniness. But the Muppet Show, I didn't think about it. I loved watching it.
Yeah.
I didn't watch them, religiously, but man, I watch them now.
Yeah.
I mean, those episodes hold up. But I didn't realize that he was basically taking the English dance hall, sort of almost like vaudeville, their version, and applying that to the show. So once again,
he was making them in England.
Yeah. So it's sort of, once again, what's old is new.
Yes.
When put through this filter.
You mentioned earlier, I knew Jim well, and I can't say I did. I met him on a few occasions, and he was really nice. And he actually once suggested that he had a show that probably never went, and it was towards the end of his life, but suggested that because people were always like, that Conan's got like a look or something.
Yeah.
He's irritating, but he's got a look. And Jim Henson suggested that I audition for something for one of his shows. And I think, I remember they sent over, I've told this, but they sent over sides that had two actors.
Right.
Two characters, and I didn't know which one he wanted me to audition for.
Right.
So I showed up at and said to the woman who was running the audition, it says Steve and Mitch, and I don't know which is which. And she said, oh, here's the character breakdowns. And she handed me Steve, and it said, women want to be with him, men want to be him. He oozes sexuality. Blah, blah, blah. And I was just like deflating. And then I said, can I see the one for Mitch? And she handed me Mitch. She was like, this gangly, goofy, red-topped goon stumbles his way through life. But people like him despite his many flaws and his asexuality. And I went, I think I'm the second guy. But no, this is a lovely tribute. And one of the things that really got to me is because of my connection, when Jim passed very suddenly in 1990, and it was such a shock because it was just out of nowhere. He gets this
53 years old.
53 years old. I was invited to that memorial, and to this day, it's the greatest send-off I've seen anybody have because it's a funeral. It's a funeral mass. It's a memorial. Right. And it started with, I guess, a letter from Jim that he had written, which is like, well, if you're reading this, it must mean I'm gone.
Right.
And he just decided to write this in case he ever passed suddenly. And he did. And it was so lovely. And then all the characters come out and we're all laughing and crying at the same time. Yeah. So you show footage of the memorial service and I was there.
Yeah.
And I, to this day, have thought, that's what everyone should be like. It can't be because we're not all Jim Henson, but that's what it should be. It really should be a celebration.
Well, it clearly was, and his son Brian read that letter, and we have a bit of that in the.
Oh my God!
And it was a tremendous tribute and moment, but he's so loved.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody we interviewed, it was actually great to make a film that I thought was interesting, could be revealing, and actually just doesn't have a dark side. I mean, it's just he literally was just a guy who lived in a positive light. And he struggled, ups and downs, difficulties on a personal side in the relationship, sure, and yet set such a great example.
Yes.
Like how you navigate that too.
Yep.
I mean, winning's easy. But when you struggle, that defines the man or the woman, and you look at both Jim and Jane, and you sort of say, well, that's we should do that.
Well, the documentary is a tonic. I would recommend just watch it because you will laugh very hard, but it's also informative about so much more, and very apt that you're speaking about it because I'm glad. you were the right guy to make this, because I think because you have just in every single decade of your life contributed good stuff, you know, and I think who can say that?
Well,
that's really remarkable, you know. And I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad I know you. I'm so glad you let me saw your arm off 30 years ago, and
we're still at it. We're still going strong.
At it. Yeah, let's do a leg. Yeah. Oh, I checked out his leg on the way in. That left one looks like it could go at any time. Anyway. Make sure Jim Henson, Idea Man, is just, it's a gift. And make sure that you check it out. And Ron Howard, you're a gift. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here.
And let's get together, get a drink, and talk sunscreen whenever you want.
Beautiful. Good.